Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this discussion about trade reporting in Asia. It's my pleasure to welcome today Oliver Williams, who's the Chief Executive Officer of DTCC, Data Repository Singapore. Before we start, I'd like to congratulate Ollie and his team on winning the Regulatory Reporting Provider category of the FOW Asia Capital Markets Awards 2020. So Oliver, thanks for joining us today. Just to start, could you just paint a picture really of the trade reporting landscape in Asia?
Sure, can. Thanks, Luke, and thank you very much for having us and also for the opportunity to participate in this. We really enjoy it and we appreciate the recognition. In terms of the landscape in Asia, I think it's fair to say that Asia itself is a fairly diverse part of the world, and we see that played out in the trade reporting space as well. We have a whole range of different players here. In terms of the industry, we've got local, very local industry that has to be reporting, but we also have global players here who are caught by this sort of regulation globally everywhere. And we also see local Asian banks that are reporting with us here in Asia, but very active across the globe. We see similarly with regulators a real mix. We see some very local regulators here that have very unique regimes, their own way of doing things. And we see others that are very globally minded and active. So we have the whole range out here. In terms of that, we actually see two different ways of reporting happening in Asia. We have situations or systems which have a centrally appointed trade repository. A good example of that would be somewhere like Hong Kong. And we have other examples like Singapore and Australia where we see a regime where there are licensed trade repositories. We're active in both of those places and many of our clients are as well. I think the other thing that's important to understand about Asia is that historically it hasn't been particularly harmonised in terms of the rule sets. We see quite different requirements across the region, but this is slowly changing, which we think is a good thing.
Okay. So I'll go on to the next question. So as you said, Oliver, the DTCC has been in Asia for a while now, since 2013, I believe. Could you just tell us about some of the ways in which you've enhanced your trade repository service in that time to improve the client experience?
Sure, Luke, absolutely. I think early on, like everyone, we started not knowing what we were going to face. So we took a global platform, we brought it to Asia, and we got it working. We got it working well with industry. But over time, we've done a lot of work to change that platform. We've done various programs focused on making the platform simpler, more efficient, and more cost effective. I think one of the things I'm really proud of is that not only have we made the platform simpler over time, but we've also been able to reduce our fees along with that simplification and being able to give back to industry in return for the hard work they've done to come along with us on that journey. We've done other things as well. I think in the early days, the focus had always been on getting your reporting in. So our industry was particularly focused on, understandably, meeting the time requirements and reporting. But over time, their needs have changed. Their need to actually understand what they were reporting to us and what we were doing with it has increased. So we've done some work to introduce the ability for people to come into our platform and have a look at what they've reported, to query it and to run reports and so on. That's something we call our portal. It's a piece of work that's been evolving over the years, and we think it's given our clients a much better client experience, much greater control over the way they report through us, and much greater transparency into what we're holding on their behalf. I think over the years, we've also seen a consolidation of our ability to provide a global service out of Asia. As I said at the beginning of this, we see a lot of different people active in the region, but we have a fair number of local firms that are globally active. And one of the value props we've really brought to that community and developed over time is to be to support them out of Asia, whether it be through other derivative reporting or things like SFTR.
Okay, so with those enhancements in mind, and based on the conversations that you have with customers, what are the key benefits that you see of using GTR specifically for your Asian customers?
Sure, thanks, Luke. I think let's start with the basis of the firm itself. So we are actually an industry-owned firm or an industry-owned company. So the GTR is actually governed and owned by industry. I think that's helped us play a role as a trusted partner in terms of the way industry uses us to report. As I said earlier, supporting clients globally out of Asia is a key part of that proposition. It's a key benefit we bring to clients, whether it be through things like SFTR or European reporting in the derivative space. Also things like the SEC reporting, which we see coming in the US in the imminent future. They are things that we can support Asian firms in meeting out of the region here. We also do a lot of work to make sure we can connect the way people are doing business with us. So we work very closely with a lot of vendors and infrastructures upstream from us to make sure there are a lot of different ways they can connect into us, report down to us. We think that gives our clients flexibility in how they utilise our system to meet their regulatory obligations. We've also built a community over the time that we've been in this space here in Asia, and I think that community is really important and will continue to be important, if not become more so. That community means that we're able to share the collective information that exists in the group that uses us. We feel that brings confidence to the way people are reporting, not just to the clients themselves, but also to the regulators.
Okay, thank you. As you mentioned, Oliver, obviously the regulatory reporting regime is changing, and different regulators around the world are introducing different requirements. Given the point you made earlier about Asia being a diverse market, there's no one regulator that oversees regulatory reporting requirements in that region. How is the platform positioned to support customers going forward as these regulations change?
Sure. I think let's just start with the premise that this change that we think is coming is going to be based on a common harmonised set of requirements. We think this is the direction that the global community is taking. The lack of that harmonisation has been one of the biggest challenges in that space, if we're honest, in the past. And we've always felt that that was going to be the way forward to really bring the most benefit out of trade reporting. I mentioned earlier some of the work we've done to re-architect our platform and to make it simpler. Effectively, what that's really done is meant that globally, while we meet all the different regulations today, we have a very common base. So the processing that happens here in Asia is very similar to the processing that happens in Europe. If you think of it from that perspective, from the client use point of view, the way they interface with us is very common globally now. So when you look at future rewrites or rule changes that are coming, particularly when you look at them being on a harmonised set of requirements, the work sounds a lot simpler. We're just talking about a change to what comes in at the front end, but the way we process and the way we provide that information back to clients and regulators is globally consistent already. So we feel the work that we've already done means that moving to this new state, as we think will happen, sets us up well to provide a platform for industry to continue to report successfully as they are today. Currently, our focus in that direction is working with industry using that community that we mentioned earlier to help guide and to help work with both industry and regulators on what that future state will look like and make sure we're doing our bit to help with that.
Okay, thank you. Could we perhaps just talk briefly about data? How does the data that the DTCC collects and collates on behalf of its customers, how can that data be used to help customers better address their changing regulatory requirements?
That is a great question. I think the idea of a common data set being used for multiple purposes is the holy grail in this space, and it's something we've been focused on for some time. Overall, we think there are definitely opportunities here. If you think about what we have here in Asia, but also globally, it is a really large pool of data that is standardized and will be even more so when we look at some of these rewrites we talked about earlier. And it's a regulatory quality pool of data. It's data that's being used to meet a regulatory requirement. So if you think of it from that perspective, there has to be other uses for that data. Some of the areas we think about when we talk about that possibility are things like price observation or proving out non-multiple risk factors. And that's a space we've already seen some work being done and some real potential. Also things like reconciliation are definitely areas that we think will be further utilised in the future. All of this, though, is dependent on that harmonisation step I talked about earlier, and that's why we're encouraged to see the direction that we think the global regulatory community is moving now. The more harmonised that data is, the more standardised it is, the cleaner it is, and the more globally consistent it is, the more opportunity people will have to use that to meet other purposes. So from that point of view, yes, we see possibilities now, and we have seen some use cases, but I really think the future is bright, and that's what we're focusing on now.
Okay. So looking ahead, what are your thoughts on how the regulatory reporting regime in Asia is likely to evolve over time? And what sort of role do you see the GTR playing within that evolution, those changing requirements that we've discussed?
Yeah, sure. I think this is an interesting question. And in terms of gazing in the crystal ball, so to speak, it's hard to know exactly where this is going to go, but we have seen some pointers, and I think we continue to see an evolution in this space. So in the early days, when we were first going live in Asia and globally to an extent, what we really saw, as I mentioned earlier, was this rush to get reporting happening. So almost a quantity over quality type approach, and that is long gone. Our client base today are very focused on what they're reporting in terms of reconciliation, quality assurance, and testing of that data. We're seeing that trend increasing over time. So rather than just saying, well, have you got my record? What we're now being asked is, have you got my record? Does it meet certain standards? Did you get it on time? Has it been provided to the regulator? What have you done with it since? And we think that this is definitely a space of growth. And what we're seeing come out of that is, unsurprisingly, a growth of reg tech or regulatory technology in the region here. We're seeing a lot of activity from vendors providing that sort of service and a lot of interest from the industry. The trend towards global harmonisation, we've discussed a number of times, is, if anything, going to accelerate this, but also, probably more importantly, is going to accelerate the possibilities in that space in terms of using technology to improve upon what you're doing today. We're well positioned to help with this. As I said, the platform itself has been simplified a number of times and continues to be so. The platform is truly global. We believe we hold the key to things like standardisation and the ability to aggregate data and so on. And we're very much focused on what that looks like in the future. I think the other area of interest, if you look at what is coming out of all of that, it is effectively a better use of data. The question is, do the expertise exist to do what needs to be done with that information you now have? We see an increasing demand for people with knowledge in this space and people with ability in this space. And I think that's driven some of the work we've done recently in partnership with others to look at consulting. How can we help the industry more with some of the expertise we hold in-house? And that consulting business is, I think, the future, certainly a future focus for us, and definitely an indicator of what can be done with more powerful data that comes out of the system.
Yes, I saw just last week that DTCC announced a new consulting service, which is that's certainly an interesting development and something we'll be watching sort of closely. But just sort of as a sort of final question, perhaps sort of stepping back slightly again, Oliver, how has the market responded in sort of general terms to the regulatory reporting, the regulatory reforms around things like trade reporting and OTC reforms more broadly? I mean, where does that leave the industry, and what are the opportunities sort of going forward for companies like yours?
Yeah, sure. I think we've touched on a lot of this, right? The reality is that there has been a lot of work put into complying with the regulation in this space, a lot of work over many, many years from our industry that we support, but also from companies like ourselves. But also, if you think about it, from the regulators as well, a lot of work has been put into ingesting and understanding that data. I think if we talk about how is it evolving, what I see and what I believe will continue to be the case is the focus is, as I said earlier, moving towards quality. Are we doing it all right? The next question is, are we doing it as efficiently as we possibly can? I think to an extent, it's fair to say that some of these requirements are actually driving changes to technology stacks within firms. Over time, the technology stack that was originally designed for other purposes has been found to be wanting or creaking under the pressure, if you like, of the burden of all the different use cases that now exist. So we are seeing some really interesting work being done. If you look at it from the point of view of data itself, we're seeing many firms looking, and not just looking at, but investing in building out data lakes, which can be used for many different purposes. That's just one example. But I think that is where the industry is going with this. Can we do it better? Can we do it more efficiently? And does that necessitate a change to the way we do things today?
Okay. Oliver Williams, CEO of DTCC Data Repository Singapore. Thank you for your time. Thank you.
Absolute pleasure, Luke. Thank you very much.